My name is Shane Coleman. I'm the STEAM educator at the Lewis Latimer House Museum, and I'll be joined by our panelists today, Reverend Audrey Williamson, as well as by Adriana Birkins, the education manager at the Lewis Latimer House Museum, who is managing our Zoom logistics. So we're going to go through just really briefly a little bit more about today's program. We're going to introduce our panelists, and then we're going to hear from them a presentation about Mother AME Zion Church. Tonight, we'll be diving into an engaging discussion about the rich history of Mother AME Zion Church. Founded in 1796 and chartered in 1799 by ministers James Varick, Christopher Rush, William Miller, and George Galbraith, the church introduced Black religious expression while catering to a growing population of Black abolitionists. After affiliate Zion churches started to open, the original church began to distinguish itself as the Mother Church. Mother Zion served as a stop along the Underground Railroad and was referred to as a Freedom Church for its active participation in Black social activism. The present Neo-Gothic church that has completed in 1925 was a haven for Black artists and intellectuals during the Harlem Renaissance and an amphitheater for civil rights activism during the 1950s and 60s. Black Historic Sites and Conversations is a series of virtual talks in collaboration with different Black heritage sites and cultural centers in the greater New York City area about the ongoing work of preserving, interpreting, and celebrating Black history and historical figures. This program is supported by the Mellon Foundation. We'd like to acknowledge that the Lewis Latimer House Museum is located in Flushing, Queens, and is on the land of the Matanakok, who are the Algonquin people. They are the Aboriginal occupants of northwestern Long Island, among the first to feel the impact of European settlement and seldom mentioned after the colonial period. The Matanakoks experienced profound changes after the 17th century, and to learn more about the Matanakok Nation, we encourage you to visit their website and Facebook page that we will now actually share in the chat. If you're not familiar with the story of Lewis Latimer, Lewis Howard Latimer was born on September 4th, 1848 in Chelsea, Massachusetts, to Virginians Rebecca and George Latimer, whose self-emancipation sparked abolitionist movements in Boston. Lewis Latimer served his country, enlisting in the Union Navy at the age of 16 in 1864, during which he taught him enlisting in the Union Navy and returning to Boston, Massachusetts, during which he taught himself how to draw. Latimer became a chief draftsman, patent expert, and inventor. Working with Hiram Maxim, Alexander Graham Bell, and Thomas Edison, he supervised the installation of lighting systems in New York, Canada, Philadelphia, and London. And of the 7 patents he received, his improvements to the incandescent light bulb made lighting more practical and affordable. We also noticed that Latimer was a creative, a musician, a poet, and an artist. As a Black man living and working during the late 1800s and early 1900s, his story and impact drive the work and mission of the Lewis Latimer House Museum today. I'm excited to introduce our speaker tonight, Reverend Audrey Williamson. Reverend Audrey Akins Williamson is a proud alumna of Rutgers University, New Brunswick, Theological and Princeton Theological Seminaries. Prior to answering her call to ministry, she was employed in the area of sales and marketing for several Fortune 500 companies, including L'Oreal and American Express. Formerly a visiting professor of sociology, religion, and gender studies at Monmouth University, she has served as a mentor for The Rise since her inception in 2018. She is the founding director of the Collaborative for Faith Leadership, housing also at Union Theological Seminary in New York City. She serves Mother AME Zion Church as the Nina M. Neely Minister of Christian Education and was formerly the senior pastor at the St. James AME Zion Church in Matawan, New Jersey. Reverend Audrey has served as a Faith and Climate Change Fellow for former President Al Gore and the inaugural cohort of the John Templeton Foundation and American Association for Advancement of Science Lifelong Learning Fellowship. At the Yale School of Divinity and Yale School of Medicine, which encourages the exchange of knowledge and expertise between and within the communities of faith and science. She serves on several nonprofit boards that focus on women in ministry, empowerment of women of color, and mental health in the African American community. Reverend Williamson is engaged in the community in meaningful ways and holds area leadership in the Links Incorporated and is a proud member of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated. Tonight, we'll hear a presentation by Reverend Williamson, followed by a conversation and Q&A session. If you have any questions that you would like our panelists to answer, please feel free to share them through the Q&A function in this Zoom. We will likely be able to get 10 questions or more, depending on the time. Please also feel free to comment, share your thoughts in the chat as the presentation goes. Without further ado, I pass it to you, Reverend Williamson.
Thank you so much, Shane. And I want to thank both you and Adriana for the work that you do and for the wonderful ways in which the Lewis Lattimore House is continuing to talk and to have a conversation around the buildings and the history of African American edifices and all that it goes with that, and really looking at the history of it. I hope that we will be able to pull up the slide. Of course, Mother Zion, I think Shane gave us a bit of information and history about Mother AME Zion Church. We're located at 140 West 137th Street, right there in Harlem. We are considered Central Harlem. And so we're doing the work there, looking to bring wellness into the community. The leadership of the church, of course, the pastor of the church, the Reverend Dr. Malcolm J. Bird, myself as the executive minister and then minister of education, and Reverend S. Rashad Hogarth, who has recently been named scholar in residence. We have other leaders, but I wanted to kind of emphasize the fact that we emphasize at the Mother Church for several different reasons. We emphasize education because without that, we shall certainly perish. And in these concerning, questionable times in terms of education and in terms of kind of bringing down the level of discourse, I'm so grateful to be here where we're being engaged and engaging in the work around history and in the work around historical buildings and historical sites. So I think Shane gave you a great history of the church. I say this to you. Many of the, especially African-American churches, predominantly African-American churches, started the same way our history started. We were worshiping in churches, whether you were Baptist or Methodist. Oftentimes you were worshiping in the churches that of the people that you worked for, or, if at that point, if there was your master, right? You tended to work in or worship in the churches that they worshiped. And so many African Americans found themselves. Methodism was a bit more open than some of the other churches in terms of inviting the African American to the church. But at some point, it became difficult to worship freely. So I share with you that we at Mother Zion, we continue to share Holy Communion, not on the first Sunday as many churches do, but on the second Sunday, because the church at the John Street Methodist Church, the members at John Street Methodist were not allowed to take communion at the same time that the whites were. And so we've kind of passed that. We never changed it because it's just a marker to remind us of where we've come from and, quite frankly, where we have to go, and that we continue to strive for a more perfect place in these United States of America. The church itself, Mother AME Zion, is actually the oldest African-American institution, not just church, institution in all of the state of New York. It's known for being the depot, as I think, Shane, you kind of talked a little bit about it, for the Underground Railroad, so that you have between 700 and 800 slaves that had escaped through the church's network. And, we celebrate the likes of Harriet Tubman and Frederick Douglass and Sojourner Truth. They were in, through, and around the church. And again, as Shane talked about, the Renaissance was there, and you had people who were not able to go to the opera and to the symphony. And this was a place, Mother Zion, and I hope that many of you will come and see the sanctuary, because it is a gorgeous, beautiful place. It's gorgeous, it's beautiful. It's also difficult to keep up because it is gorgeous and beautiful and old. But we love it. And if you come, it's just awe-inspiring and breathtaking when you get there. And so you have people, political persons, social persons, spiritual people coming. And again, Paul Robeson's brother was one of the former pastors at the church. So rich history at the Mother Church. Next slide, if you would, please. But I need to, as I talk about Mother Zion and I talk about where we are now, I have to go back to Seneca Village. Now, I don't know how many of you know Seneca Village. I was sharing with my cousin a couple of months ago about Seneca Village, and I was sharing with her how Seneca Village was before Central Park was. And she said that she actually graduated from Princeton, and she said she's in architecture, and she had done her final or senior thesis or something on the architecture at Central Park. And she said she never knew about Seneca Village. And I think a lot of people could say, I mean, I think maybe it's a little bit more known now, but Seneca Village was a place of refuge. It was between 89th Street, 82nd and 89th Street, where you find Central Park now. And the group of people began to move when they moved out of John Street Methodist. They created a community right there where Central Park is now. And the community had the church, of course, but it also housed many of the community members. There were schools there was education. It was a community. And so many of the African Americans that were there, many of the Blacks that were there, were also homeowners. And during that time, if you were a homeowner, the only way that you could vote as a Black person was if you owned land, right? If you owned some kind of property. And so they had this, is about 225 residents. And I'm sharing this, and I hope you all will go at some point to this area, because there are markers and there's signs. And I will say that the Central Park Conservancy has really tried to lift up Seneca Village and the history. As a professor of sociology, I say this to us, that oftentimes when we're connected to the community by the land and by the ways in which we engage with each other, right? And so the idea that people were there, and it was a village. You know, we talk about the village of the African American community. This was a village where they worshiped and they lived and they educated. And all of a sudden, one day, someone said it might be a good idea if we had some really green land that we could run horses on, or whatever we wanted to do. And I always say, I say it no matter to whom I'm speaking. I say it when I go to the Central Park Conservancy. I say it when I talk to anybody. This was perhaps the original eminent domain, because in the midst of this community, someone thought it'd be a good idea to have Central Park. And so they were displaced. History tells us that perhaps they were given some compensation for the land that was taken from them. But even in the best of circumstances, when we think about eminent domain, whether it's Black or white or Native Americans, no matter what, when someone comes, normally the government, the state government, takes the land, there never is compensation that is equal to what the land is worth. And there could never be compensation because, of course, you're losing your grounding. And so that's what we found with the central, Seneca Village and Mother Zion. So they were dispersed, and we can go to the next slide. And so you see that the congregation kind of moved around. And you think, if we think about that, it makes sense, right? Because when you are displaced, it's difficult to kind of find your way again. And remember, they were homeowners, so they had homes and schools, so they were all kind of an enclave, if you would. And so you see that the congregation kind of moved from this place, Lower Manhattan on Church Street, and then Bleecker Street, finally up near where they were before, 89th, and then we went to 136th Street. Now we're again at 137th Street, right there in the 100 block of West 137th Street. So that's been our location for a very long time, and so we're at home there. And if you would go to the next slide, because just the beauty of our home. This is the historic building, Mother Zion. It was designed by the first registered African-American architects, George Foster, and it was named a city landmark in 1993. And so that we're proud about too, right? That think about in the 20s, the fact that you had this architect that was able to design this beautiful building and to raise it up, and that we were able to raise it up, the congregation, and for us to have been housed there for such a long period of time. And so there's such history in each and every brick, and each and every window, and each and every pew. There's such history in there. And so I think sometimes we have to remind ourselves of the difficulty they must have had to kind of do all of this, right? Not just the fact that, George Foster was an architect in that time, but the fact that he was able to design such a gorgeous building, and that there were people who were willing and able to raise it up. If you would go to the next building. So that's the building right there on 137th Street. That's a picture of James Varick. We're called the Mother Church. And so I want to just say a little bit about that. We're Mother AME Zion Church because we started, of course, here in New York. And as Varick and Christopher Rush and the other kind of founders of the denomination began to move about, and began to start new societies, as they were called, we began to think about this church, the church that is the founding church, as the mother. And I have, just as an aside, I have one of my mentors who says to us all the time, because it is difficult. The church is an older building, so we have, there's always something that goes wrong. So when you fix the roof, then the floors leak or whatever. And he always says, men and women may die, but mother must live. And so that's kind of our motto, that we make sure that we are preserving mother, not just because it's important to the denomination, and it's important to the people, because God forbid, if something were to happen to Mother Zion, the church, Mother Zion, the people, then what does the denomination look like? What are we looking like, right? And I just as another aside, we're Mother Zion. There's a mother church, Mother Bethel, which is in Philadelphia. So we are sister organizations. People tend to think we're the same, and they oftentimes will call us A.M.E. because we have the little Zion extra on there. So oftentimes A.M.E. But we're separate denominations, pretty much the same in terms of the way we were founded. They in Philadelphia, we in New York, and pretty much the same way that our structure is the same. But we are the mother church there. I wanted to just go back for 1 second, because I wanted to say that you see this picture, and we say this all the time, and people get a little like, you really have this man? Yes, he is housed in the undercroft of the sanctuary, so downstairs. We have a small museum. We're looking to broaden that, but even though it's small, it's rich. And housed on the side is the tomb of Bishop Varick, who was the first bishop of the A.M.E. Zion Church. So he is there. And as an aside, in Philadelphia, they also have their first bishop, Richard Allen, housed in their undercroft. So that is a thing. And but you can come. It's just a little tomb. It doesn't, it's not scary. People I think it's scary, but we do have, and I didn't want to say we do have a museum there. And so on Sunday mornings, if you come early enough, we will give you a tour. And I believe they give you a tour afterwards, but we definitely will give you a tour before the morning service that begins at 11 o'clock on Sundays. Now you can move. Thank you. I wanted to share a little bit about some of the educational ministries that we have. And we have other ministries, but I just wanted to share some of these because education is so very important. I said this earlier, but so very important has been to us. During the pandemic, we were kind of out front for our denomination and really for the whole as we were providing teaching and as well as worship service during the pandemic. And so this is something that we hold to very, very closely, that education, especially for people of the diaspora, is important. It was in many ways the way out for a lot of us. And so we continue to hold that. And not just when we say education, yes, Christian education, we're a Christian organization, but education in general. We have an 8-prong way of thinking about wellness. And of course, one of those prongs is education. One of them is mental health. And so we are on Sunday next, so Sunday the 24th, we are having a grand opening that is called Mother Zion Cares. And it is free mental health and counseling in our community. Right there, it's going to be housed in Mother Zion's church and in Mother Zion, and is going to be led by a mental health professional. And so we are so grateful for being able to do that for our community. One of the things that we worked on right after the pandemic, we worked with NYU, New York University, to do a post-COVID survey to see what people were concerned about, what they were caring about during the after we have come out of all of the lockdowns and the fears and the thinking we're fine and then going back. And one of the things was mental health. The other one we found, and we have backup on this, is that there is, by some standard, about 68% of young men in New York who do not have a high school diploma. That sounds crazy to me, but apparently that's a number that is real. And so seeing that, we have a pending collaboration with Gutman Community College, where we will offer GEDs to young men and also kind of take them along so that if they want to go to school, that Gutman's an opportunity, but it may be some other way in which they want to proceed in life. I laugh because we just recently had a pipe burst in our church. And the pipe burst is going to cost probably close to like $8,000 to fix because the pipes are old, right? Talking about these historic buildings, historically, yes, beautiful. But, the reality is that it's difficult to keep them up to code. So we were laughing. We said, I'm a preacher, I'm a teacher and all of that. I was like, but in my next life, maybe I'm going to be a plumber because, yeah, I mean, it's just in one fell swoop. So I say that to say that everybody doesn't have to go to college. Everybody doesn't have to do this, that, or the other thing. So we're going to kind of make sure we're broadening the way in which we're thinking about education, because we need everybody in the community. We need the plumber, we need the teacher, we need the preacher, we need the electrician, we need everybody, and everybody in conversation together, right? Because we all have something that we offer. Talk about Seneca Village and the Central Park Conservancy, and we do continue to work with them. They one of their focuses is during Juneteenth. They do a lot of spotlight on our church, and they have some new initiatives. And so we're working with them to highlight, again, Seneca Village, because many people aren't clear about that. And then quarterly educational talks that are going to be sponsored by some of our healthcare organizations or healthcare collaborators that work with us, that are instrumental in kind of putting out to the community some of the conversations that are going to equip our people. And so that's why I'm so grateful to be here and to also partner with the Lewis Lattimore, because this is where we want to be. This is where we want to engage people and to talk about and to think about things differently and to share our history and to share back with us and kind of this talk back where we think out loud about how we move forward. Because, if you could move forward. So I wonder now if we could engage. I don't know how long I took, but hopefully it was okay. Yeah, we're at 7:00. Ooh, I talked a lot. So, but I'd love to hear your thoughts and what you're thinking of, or any questions, or anything that any way that you're thinking about things differently, or something completely over there, a U-turn or something. So we'd love to hear from you.
Absolutely. It looks like we have some questions coming in.
So Kate, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Kate asks, would love to know more about the spread of denominations in New York State, especially the Mid-Hudson Valley. Eric was born in Newburgh, New York. How are denominational churches connected?
Okay, so let's see. I'm thinking about how we do this. So it's one of the things I think about a lot, because if I would go back, and I'm old enough to have 1970 seem like it was a little bit long time ago, not a long, like 50 years ago, long ago. But if I would go back to, say, the 70s, you had denominations, you had mainline denominations, which tended to be Anglo, right? White denominations, and oftentimes denominations, Black organizations and denominations came out of there. As I said, like oftentimes people would go, they'd be Baptist because they're either their master or the person they worked for, whatever, was Baptist. And so you had Baptists, and you had different sects of Baptists. So you had the progressives, and you had missionary Baptists. So of course, when we start to think about denominations kind of grew. You had Catholics, small c, Catholics, and then when that went to Rome, it became Roman Catholic. And so all of the denominations that I'm talking about are Protestant, meaning that they protested the Catholicism. They protested some of what was going on in Catholicism. So as the protests started, you had the Episcopalians, which are probably the closest to Catholicism, and then you had the Reformers, and you had the Baptists, and you had the Methodists, all of those different denominations. Now, and I give you all of that, which with a very 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 short kind of explanation to say that now it's very much weakened. When I say that denomination, we're post-denominational, we're post-denominational. Years ago, people would join a church because that was their denomination. They were born into it, and that's where they were, right? And they used to have these saying, I'm Kojic born and Kojic bred, and all those different ways of thinking about it. Now, people, if they're going to church, because that's a whole nother conversation we can have, but they don't necessarily care about the denominations. It may be the ministry, the ministry that is that brings them in. It may be the singing, the pastor, the preacher. It may be convenience. So denominations just don't have the strength that they used to have. I don't remember, and I'm sorry, you said something about your location. So I'm not sure. I can't remember where you said you were located, and I'm not sure I would know what denominations are stronger there. I do know that. So, for example, I would think in the South you have the strength of the Baptist Church, but you also have the strength of the Methodism, because they kind of moved down, and our headquarters is there. And then South Carolina is a strength for the A.M.E churches. So you have these pockets of strength. The North, struggles with people. They just struggle. It's just that the Bible Belt is true. People really do go to church. They really do. I'm not going to say they follow Christ. They follow an ethic, but they do go to church. And so you don't have that as much here. You have competing interests. People just rather New York, in the city, people rather go to brunch, quite frankly. Than brunch is more full than many of the churches. So we have to think about ways in which we go back to thinking about addressing the needs of the community. So if I think about the Black church in the 60s and the 50s and before, they were the center of the community. I talked about Seneca Village. They were the center of the community. They made sure that you didn't need all of the additional state-sponsored assistance, because the church made sure that you were educated, that there was food in the community, that no one went without. And so we have to start to think about it, maybe not in terms of food, although in Harlem, there is food insecurity. So yes, we've got to think about that, but we also have to think about healthcare and making sure that we give access to healthcare to people who don't necessarily want to go to the doctor and don't trust the doctor. And that's one of the things that we found, that if we bring our doctors to the community, then people will get well, because they may trust you if you come to the community. They're not going to go, they don't trust necessarily, but they definitely don't want to go to someone over there who they don't necessarily trust. So we have to start to think about what do we offer that makes people want to come. But one thing that we found in my post-COVID survey was, of all of the institutions, the Black church is still, even though it's gone down, is still the most trusted. And so that gives us hope for us to be able to then say to others, listen, we're trusted. If you really care about the community, let's collaborate. Let's work together so that we can build a healthy community together, because they don't trust you. They might trust us a little bit, but together, maybe we can build trust and wellness and wholeness in our communities. So I think we have to rethink the Sunday, or even the Sunday, Wednesday, or, I think we have to rethink just being one dimensional, I guess is the best way for us to think about it. And I didn't answer your question. I went all around because I don't remember where you were. But you could reach out to me on the side, and if you're looking for a place, we can talk about that, or we can have a conversation about how denominations look in New York. Because I haven't necessarily studied that, so I don't think I have a good answer either, actually.
Yeah, that was still a very rich and thoughtful kind of walkthrough about not only Mother's approach to community and approach to kind of codifying what the church looks like in the 21st century, but also in a number of ways, it seems how things are definitely changing when we think about denominations, which is very helpful. Mm-hmm. We're getting a lot of questions coming in. I'm going to try to go through them in the order that they've arrived.
Love it.
I'm gonna actually go into this next question very briefly. Someone had asked, what about Lewis Latimer? So Lewis Latimer was actually a Unitarian Universalist. And as a member of that church, we believe that the origins may have come from perhaps being born in Chelsea, Massachusetts, traveling, of course, throughout the East Coast. If you have any knowledge about the Unitarian Universalist history, I'd love to hear it. But we actually do know that Lewis Latimer was a co-founder of the Flushing branch. We actually had the Unitarian Universalist Church visit the museum this past week. So that was really incredible. The next question we have is about, are there any connections between the AME Zion denominational churches? Are there any historical connections or existing connections that you want to talk about?
Can you ask that question again? I'm not sure I understand the question.
Yeah, no problem. I'm trying to make sure I'm wording it correctly. How are the AME denominational churches connected?
So I think you're talking about the AME and the AME Zion. I think I kind of touched on that. I think that's what you're talking about, or maybe. Okay, so I'll do two things. The AME Zion is a denomination that is, as I said, started in New York. It kind of spread to Jersey, then it went south kind of to DC, the DC area, whatever. We're all connected. We come together in a general conference setting where we elect bishops and people that will lead us, right? So we come together. We're international, so it's not just the United States, but Africa, which, by the way, is the fastest growing of the denomination. We have sites in Europe. I don't think I'm trying to think Asia. Maybe, yes, a few in Asia. So we're always looking to kind of grow. So it's a one denomination that we have 12 bishops that oversee the work, that speak for us, that lead us, that give us vision, that give us that move us kind of in the direction that they see fit. As I said, we started in New York. The AME Church started in Philadelphia under Richard Allen. It's a mirror. They tend to be, and I'm just going to be very honest, they tend to be a stronger church. They're larger, but with larger often comes bigger problems too. But they have the same oversight. They have a few more bishops. They may have 19 bishops or so, but they have the same oversight. I believe now, nobody's alive to tell if it's true or not. But at one point, it was believed that the AME Church, Richard Allen, traveled to New York to visit with Varick to say, let's be one. And it is purported that Varick is the one that said no, because they were both AME at one point. So it was just AME New York, AME Philadelphia. And then the AME New York, to differentiate, put the Zion on their name. But it is purported that they were at one point thinking about coming together. And because even back in the 17 and 1800s, people had egos, so it didn't happen. And it's unfortunate. And they have tried to, there's another Black Methodism denomination, that's the CME, which was called Colored Methodist, and now is Christian Methodist Episcopal. So again, the same organization. They are stronger kind of in the Delta, so Louisiana and that Delta area, Mississippi, there. That's where their strength is. They don't have very many here, many churches here. At one point, AME Zion, our denomination, and the CME were almost merged. They literally almost merged. And that was in, I want to say 2000, but even in 2000, egos. So they almost got there. They had a memorandum of understanding and everything. And then it fell apart because someone said, well, we don't want whatever. So the Episcopal piece tells us that we are governed the same way. We simply have, we meet differently, separately. We have had some times when all of the Black Methodism has come together to join together, which I hope we'll see again, because there is strength in numbers. But yeah, so that's how it works. So oftentimes people don't differentiate, and usually most of the time people are just like AME. So we always have to say, no, it's AME Zion. So that's when you hear us saying that, it's just because we are different, have different umbrella, but the umbrellas look the same.
I like that. A different umbrella, but the umbrellas look the same. They all have the same purpose.
Same. One's blue and one's purple. That's all. Something. Yeah. And I'm always saying this because the fact is that I don't know, maybe if we could figure out, and this is a larger statement, maybe if we could figure out how we could walk together because we agree on 12 things, and the 13th thing, because we don't agree on that, we kind of take our marbles and we go in different directions, and maybe we would be stronger just in general. And this is as a people, and I mean as a Black people, but as a people in general. Maybe if we could figure that out, how to kind of let some of that go, we could actually do good. Imagine that. So, but who am I? I'm just one person who's trying to pull us all together because this whole division isn't working too well. But anyway, so
It's really it's just great to hear though that like in this conversation series, what's on your mind, what's on the mind of the community, what's on the mind, and a lot of folks that I think who are asking questions are definitely thinking the same thing. We have another question here that's actually about Seneca Village and the Mother AME Zion Church. So this person says, I knew about Seneca Village, but not any association with Mother AME Zion Church. This may be also historical, or if there's anything kind of ongoing, like you mentioned in the educational program, what are some ways that Seneca Village and Mother AME are connected?
So, as I said, their first site was there at Seneca Village, and they had a village. And I think that's why I beat this horse, because sometimes we get set up to fail. They were there, they were educating, they were worshiping. There's another church that was there too. I think it's All Saints. And so we meet during Juneteenth. And I'm pressing the conservancy to start to think about ways in which they can kind of, I don't know, reparations maybe. And I know that's a heated word, but they believe that they were given monies to move and to lead, but you can't, as I said, you can't pay people for being kind of removed from their home and everything that they knew, especially as it was enclosed. But Seneca, yes, so Seneca Village was indeed a functioning community, a community within a community. And I don't know, I should know this, so I apologize. I don't know exactly how, why, like what all of the ins and outs of why Central Park came to be. I don't know. But I do know that the village was kind of the first to go. And so if I would be positive about it, I would simply say that that was just really good land and blah, blah, blah. But if I would, if I would have a little conspiracy theory, I'd say that perhaps people didn't want to see folk living in community because maybe they are thinking about how to overthrow whatever is happening in the city, because you do know that there were slaves in New York too. So I could go either way on that. But I do know that oftentimes when people of color or Native Americans have land and they have things going on, that sometimes it needs to be disrupted. People think that those that have power feel like it needs to be disrupted. I think I feel that way about Seneca Village. And so I'm pressing them to not just have markers to say, because I always say, this is holy ground, y'all. This is, so your children are playing on it. You got your dogs doing all kinds of whatever. This is holy ground, because this is the ground that they walked out of. I mean, think about that in 1790. They walked out of a white Methodist church to go and start their own, and then started, unheard of, started a whole community with the church and houses and owning land. And then it was taken from them. And so, I don't know, there's just something, we just need to continue to explore it and to continue to talk about it and to continue to think about what it looks like, and I mean, I can call a roll about other places that it's happened to. I mean, they didn't set fire to it perhaps, but it's still no more, right? And we're putting up signs saying, oh, this is where Seneca Village was. And, what could it have been today if in fact they had been allowed to keep it? And there's a gentleman, his name is John Williams. He has family members that did belong to Mother Zion. And so we're working on getting some of his writing and some of what, what he left behind, to see if we can kind of piece it all together. Now, I had a lady who did write a very big, almost an anthology of Central Park. And so she pushes that they gave them money and everything, but, I just say that they should have left them alone. But anyway, so yes, Seneca Village, you're going to hear more about that. You're going to hear more about it. We were actually right before, this is just an aside, right before COVID hit, we were actually, Gayle King was going to do a special on that. So I have to kind of revive that because that was one of the things I was doing. It was on TV1 and, we talked about it in terms of the eminent domain. So we need to kind of start to think about reviving that work.
That's incredible. A really great plug too. Like, I think again, in the honor of the work that we're doing here, these conversations are very much ongoing. So that's some really great background and also a great nod to some other work that's going on in that area. We are coming up on 7:20. I want to try to fit in as many questions as possible. This question, I think, is really directed at the community as a whole on the webinar today. Someone from our chat mentions, I was an original member of the Committee to Save the Latimer House in 1988. Latimer was an original founder, as mentioned, of the Unitarian Universalist Church of Flushing in 1908. The building still exists, but the congregation is disbanded in 2020. The question is kind of openly asking, anyone here interested in having that uniquely special place landmarked? Thank you. And as folks, hopefully in the chat get to connect over that, are you aware of any other preservation efforts or landmarking efforts that kind of surround the area where Mother AME Zion is, or any other churches, as kind of you mentioned, like in the work to continually repair the relationships surrounding the community of the church? Are there any other efforts that you've heard about or can mention that are in the same kind of vein as landmarking special places?
That was for me.
Yeah, just in case you have heard of anything. No, you're good.
I'm sorry. When you went to Universal, I was like, oh, that takes me out. Say that again.
Yeah, just if you've ever, or if there's any kind of connections through Mother AME Zion Church of other places that are to be landmarked, other recent landmarked places, things that you've perhaps heard about happening in the area of Manhattan, big places like Seneca Village, for example, moving from having plaques to anything else, just anything like that.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah, I have to think about that. I don't think I know that answer yet. We'll
No
think
problem.
about that. This will be one of those ongoing conversations because I don't have that one yet.
Yeah, no problem at all. Hopefully, folks in the chat can connect over that with that attendee. We have another question that I'm really interested in hearing about. Are young people involved in your church? And has there been any integration of technology to propel the outreach?
So we'll start with technology. Our technology is, that's the other thing I meant to put is that's one of our other collaborations is with Union Seminary, where we're using different platforms to kind of engage people, the kind of the way we're doing here, because we stream live, we do all of that, but really having conversation that is rich and that isn't just at the surface, but at people asking these questions and us thinking about them and saying, I don't know, but I can find out where to go. My dad used to say all the time, I'd ask him all these questions like, you can go to the library. Well, now we can go, we can find, we can read. And so, yeah, I don't know, but I can always find out. So we're doing so, but I think the technology piece and connecting to people who may not want to step foot, but who want to have conversations like this. They may not want to step foot in our church, and that's okay, but want to have conversations. We just had a mental health seminar where we talked about mental health in the Black community. And we talked with Northwell about how they are trying to do the work. And we broadcasted that. We, had people come on in Zoom events or something to have those kinds of conversations. So we're doing that work. Our young people, not so much. And that's a concern. That's a concern. It's a concern for most churches. And how are we engaging young people? And I think we have to rethink, because young people in this day and age are not going to go just because she said so, unless you got it on one. But for the most part, even when I say young people, I mean, people 20, 30. Now, it's always been that people who are 20 or 30 kind of don't necessarily get connected to a faith community until they start to have children and they start to need a little more grounding. But now you have less of that, and they're using other sources of grounding, as it were. Yes, so young people are missing from most of our places of faith. and we have to address it, as opposed to saying they need to come, they have to, we always say this, people need to do this or that. And actually we need to kind of examine ourselves and see, as an institution, what do we need to offer? Because there are places that have young people who have actively engaged young people, but what are we doing? And here's what I will say, and this is for us, and it's for a lot of other places too. Oftentimes we have buildings, and you heard me talk about how much I love the building and it's beautiful, but sometimes those buildings are monuments and they're no longer useful. And so you have these huge pews that aren't being filled. And maybe you have to, I have a friend of mine who is a pastor right on Broadway and 116th, I think, Presbyterian, I think. And he, old church, historic and everything. And eventually he pulled the pews out so that he can have dinner. He can invite people to dinner. And, it may be homeless people, it's anybody, or people that are without housing at the time. It can be anybody, but they treat them as though they're honored guests. And so they bring them in, they set up the tables, they serve them, tablecloths and everything. And he started a garden on the top, because we don't have that much space in New York, so you got to go up. So he has a garden on the roof and everything. And so we've got to start to think about what are we preserving the buildings for? As we preserve them, how are they still useful? So it's preservation, but the usefulness of the building, of the places. And I always say that, I used to say this all the time, like the asset is the building. So what are you doing with that beautiful asset? How are you serving the community? Or are you just making it a museum? Like, we got a museum downstairs, but we don't have to make the rest of the church a museum, right? Because it's eventually a museum just kind of lives in history. And so I think that we have to rethink how we're using our buildings. And I've heard this, we hear that, but we have to really rethink it. We really have to have a strategic plan about how we're going to use buildings and rethink, because we have old people in the church who are, they like it the way it used to be. Remember when it used to be? Yeah, but remember, like, that was a long time ago, long time ago. And the older you get, the longer it seems like, the less time seems like it's gone. But like I said, 1970s, 50 years ago, like, that's a long time. Like 2000 is 25 years ago. That's a long time. It doesn't seem like it is, but it is a long time, and things have changed. And so we have to start to think about new ways of engaging the community, and the community looks different now too. And that's a whole nother conversation about community that we need to have as well, because the community doesn't look like it used to anywhere.
Absolutely. What a great, I think, response, and continuing again conversation about things like adaptation. We have a couple of more minutes. We do have a quick question in here that I hopefully can squeeze in. Someone from the chat is asking, any connections to Charleston, South Carolina?
Say the question.
The church, any connections to Charleston, South Carolina?
So it's interesting you would say that. So Charleston is where Mother Emanuel was. Is where Mother Emanuel is, right? Mother Emanuel was the church where the boy came shot up, right? Am I right? Because now the A.M.E. Church in Charleston, where he went in and shot up 9 people. I don't even remember how long ago. Do you guys remember that?
Yeah. The person who's asking says, yes, you are correct.
Yeah. Okay. So that's an A.M.E. church, not an AME Zion Church, but that's an A.M.E. church. But it would be interesting that you say that, because I used to have a bishop who would say, because a lot of churches used to, what they would do was, when the bishop of the A.M.E. church came, they would be A.M.E. And then when the bishop of the A.M.E. Zion Church came into town, they'd be A.M.E. Zion. My bishop used to say, a lot of those churches, because we didn't tend to them, we started them in Zion, but the AMEs kind of took them over. They just kind of took the Zion off. And the AMEs are very, 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 very strong in South Carolina. That's one of their strongest areas. But that's an AME church. Mother Emanuel's an AME church. I guess it's the mother of the South, so they call it Mother Emanuel. And so but that we have churches in Charleston, but I think you're talking about that church, because it was always prominent. And then after the 9 people passed away, I think then it became, something even, something more prominent, which is, it's interesting because, and this is just me talking. There was a woman that was sent there afterwards. So there's difficulty sometimes with women being pastors in churches. And again, we have a whole conversation about that. So Mother Emanuel was kind of the first church that mother, with the mother moniker on it, that had a woman as the senior pastor. And she only lasted a couple of months. I don't know what happened, but it's the South and it was historic. But I say that to say that the AME Church in Philadelphia, Mother Bethel, which is the mother church, I talked a bit about it, has just appointed a woman as the pastor. She's strong. She finished Barnard and Union Theological Seminary and worked at one point with Secretary of State Hillary Clinton on her presidential campaign. So we're really happy about that. And I kind of drop that in and leave that with you because that's also part of the history of the church, especially the Black church. And a lot of that comes from way back when you had the pastor who was the center of everything, and he was always a man. And so still rethinking that and seeing what that looks like and seeing how that affects our politics in this country as well. So all of that kind of mushed in there. I leave that with you because there's still a lot of work to do, even as we're loving the buildings that we have and we're trying to do the work of ministry, we still have a long way to go.
That's incredible. We're actually going to begin to wrap up, but I am forever changed by this conversation. I hope our participants are as well. I definitely want to thank Adriana Birkins, our education manager, for helping with the Zoom logistics. Yes, a round of applause. You're going to be seeing in the chat, our attendees, some links to connect with us, to connect with Reverend Williamson. Reverend Williamson, I want to thank you especially for your expertise, for your candor, for the kind of rich discussion you've allowed us to hopefully continue, and hopefully more people and more from this Zoom session can now visit, join, see more about what Mother AME Zion Church has to offer. Our next conversation will take place on Thursday, December 12th at 6:30 p.m. We'll be talking with Christy Love, School Programs Manager at the Apollo Theater, to learn more about its history, present, and exciting future. Very similar to today. Please let us know from the chat and from our attendees if there are any other Black historical sites in New York City that you would like us to include and invite in the future. If you enjoyed tonight's program, please sign up for our newsletter for more future events. And we'd just like to thank everyone so much for joining. Please find the links in the chat, and also Reverend Williamson. People I'm sure are itching to ask you more questions. So we'll definitely make sure that you all have contact information. And I'll pass the word over to Reverend Williamson if you'd like to say anything before we go.
No, just thank you so very much for joining and for the rich questions in the conversation, and love to engage. Again, it's what I do, it's what I love. So please reach out. I think they have it. Is it in the chat, my email? Please reach out if you want to just have a conversation, and we will do that because I love to engage and to think about how we move forward.
Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful evening, and see you next time.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.